Hey everybody, before we get started, I just remind you this episode is brought to you by patrons like Adam DeHarp, FGO Comics, Architect 10, Blacklist OG, Carlos, Qua, Jeremy Vasquez, Kylie Denton, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Rogue Robin, Shawnee P, some guy named Bob, Sodasono for 2 for 723, Video Games 5, and Zach Reed. If you like what we do and want to see more, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get access to episodes early and other goodies, and it really helps us out. Thank you for supporting. Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll a 5-star. Yes, it's a Wanted episode, and this episode is technically new. This episode has never been done before. I double-checked like 5 times. So if it's not new, I don't know up from down. Okay, so the most anticipated Gilfest is upon us, which is actually a perfect opportunity to do a Wanted on Gilgamesh, because while he is one of the first limited units to ever come out, I believe technically the first, because that would have been the real big pop right away at the game start, that banner. To the Hammer Kentucky. There's a little bit of delay there. I think they were both, Gil and Kentucky were both coded in the game, but not available at start. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that bit of history. We're here to talk about Gil. So, Gilfest gives us a perfect opportunity to do Wanted on Gil, a limited 5-star archer, because usually, while he's not unpopular, he's usually bundled into things like New Year's or, more commonly in the English version of the server, Thanksgiving bundles. So he's usually bundled together with a lot of SSRs, which makes it kind of hard to sort everybody out and, pick and choose a Wanted. But now he's going to get his own raid up, he gets his own festival, we'll talk about him. So this is Let's Talk FGO Wanted, if you're not familiar with this show. This is the show where we talk about a servant, we review, we discuss them, we talk about their things, we make you look at pretty pictures. And in general, we cover 4 segments, talking about a character's real-life history, whether they are fictional or actually historical, but their real-life history. We talk about their fate lore with a capital L, where they come from, where they go, Cotton Eye Joe. Then we'll discuss their mechanics, how the unit works out mechanically, what niches they do. We also usually bundle in stuff like who's good supports, or who do they support? What kind of CEs do you want to use? We're also using the advanced version of my infographic where the skill and ascension items are displayed. And then lastly, we talk about a unit's rarity. Not their star rarity, even though technically got a little weird about that this year. But we talk about how frequent their raid ups are, which is a very common idea to know when stuff happens, to know when you want to save, when you should save, etc., etc. So we're going to dive into Gil, who has quite a long history in the real life and the fates. So let's just jump in and go to real life history. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic poem from Mesopotamia. I believe the original stuff is Sumerian, but it's it's believed to be the oldest surviving work of literature, and one of the oldest texts we have, period. The stuff we've got dates from around 2100 BC, so that's about 4,000 years ago. Collected in clay tablets. Now, unfortunately, while we do have most of the plot, there may have been some stuff in between or some stuff after. We lost some stuff. It got a little weird. I could recite to you the entire Cliff's Notes version of the poem right now, but I won't. You guys either probably already know it or could easily find it out. It's pretty cool. You should look it up sometime. But it's, like I said, humanity's probably oldest work of literature. We've got oldest work of fiction. And it basically has 2 parts that we know of, which roughly the first part talks about Gilgamesh, the super cool bestest king of Uruk, OC Do Not Steal, literally called Surpassing All Kings, right? Pretty cool. That may be why he's a big deal. He's super old, and also he's considered to be really cool. Anyway, he's just fucking around, and the gods do a thing, and they send Enkidu, who we have already done a Wanted on, to go hang out with him and fight him, but then they turn into bestest bros, and they go on bro adventures until Enkidu is killed for reasons. And then the second half is Gilgamesh undertaking the quest for immortality, aka understanding human mortality, mourning, all kinds of dealing with all that stuff, and just basically finding his place as a human and returning as a wiser and less fucky aroundy king. Apparently he was pretty cool because they called him stuff like surpassing all other kings, etc., etc. So obviously this story is incredibly retold, but also very iconic. It features discussions of topics like floods. In some lost tablets or some later tablets, we believe that Gilgamesh went to the underworld. It deals with all kinds of stuff. Seeing the abyss, immortality, many cultural touchstones. It's a story that has been retold, adapted, and translated all throughout human history because it's so fucking old. Got some great quotes in it too, but we're not going to talk about that. Again, I assume you are familiar, and if you are not, please look it up somewhere. Just because it's really cool, and as much as Wanted is to talk about lore, this is one of those things that, you should just get into it on your own. It's actually a really cool story. It's funny, because we're about to talk about Gil's Fate lore, and how, especially early in Fate, he's kind of an asshole who sucks. But the actual epic, I think, is really cool, and the story is great. Read it sometime. And like I said, though, I do want to reiterate, there are some tablets and some alternate versions and stuff we have lost or that are fragmentary, so there's some bits and bobs we don't know. It's entirely possible that after becoming super cool, awesome Super King, the wise King Gilgamesh did punch a resurrected Tiamat in the schnoz. We don't know. So let's talk about his Fate lore, because that we will probably be here for much longer. We've already been here for 5 minutes. It's going to be another 5 minutes. So, Gilgamesh appeared as one of many antagonists in the original Fate Stay Night, for reasons. But that's where probably a lot of people bumped into him in the various adaptations of various routes, where he shows up as a guy who usually jobs. I don't know what to say. He loses every time. Well, it's not true. I think there are probably some bad ends where Gil wins. But in the mainline stories, Gil always loses. Sometimes embarrassingly so. Doesn't stop people from thinking he's cool, though, because he keeps coming back. He also features as a supporting character in Hollow Ataraxia, and is another major antagonist in Fate Zero, which is the prequel to Fate Stay Night. So, yes, all throughout the original Fate Stay Night timeline, era, zone, whatever, Gil is a recurring antagonistic, or at the very least, a character who is kind of an asshole who just says stuff and talks people into doing things. Keep in mind that he's kind of a dickbag even before he's doused in all the world's evil, so it didn't really change that much. So that's where most people are familiar with him, but Gilgamesh was also added as a playable character in Fate Extra CCC. He's the 4th playable character, after Nero, Tomo, and Emiya, if you didn't know, where he has a big whole long story arc and is kind of a cool guy, I guess. He's okay. Also, his class is just Gilgamesh in that. It's hilarious. This is probably where a lot of people get their more positive opinion of Gil from, because he's not, he's still prideful and kind of an asshole, but he at least is basically part of the protagonist team, so it makes him a lot more interesting and dynamic talking about stuff and doing cool things. He also returns as a supporting character for Extella, because Moon, where again, he's not entirely an asshole. Interesting how character drift goes. You've also probably heard, well, I don't know exactly where to call it, but he's one of the major characters in Strange Fate, which is still ongoing. Gil just keeps coming back. He keeps coming back so much that he's actually a major character in FGO. He shows up in the Babylonian chapter, where he does stuff. Now, technically, I should say the FGO focused, at least in the story, Gilgamesh is the caster version of him, the Wise King. He is the version who shows up after all of the Epic of Gilgamesh stuff happens. That means he's more mature, more understanding, better suited to his kingship. Archer Gilgamesh, as you see now, is generally referred to as Gil in his peak, but generally while he is on the quest of the adventure. He hasn't settled down, so his arrogance is a little sharper, a little more dickish in its style. Caster Gil still has a huge ego, but he's at the very least a wise and productive king. He takes an active role in his leadership and trying to move things forward. Archer Gil is a little bit of a prick, but he's also really strong because he does lots of stuff. And also, I should shout out that Gil's been in this a while. There is in Fate Prototype, in the notes we have in the OVA we've shown, there is a prototype version of Gil even, so he's been around that long. Got a very, very long history with Fate. I'm sure you've heard of him or seen him somewhere. Because I think probably the only one where he doesn't show up at all would be, APOC. Because at least in, I'm assuming this is true for the light novels and manga, that he shows up in flashbacks, but at least in the Case Files anime, there's a couple flashbacks because that's in the Zero timeline. It's kind of a big deal. So yeah, no, he's fairly important and fairly recurring. And the reason why Gilgamesh is quite strong in Fate, we'll just drop this on you, is because of his oldness, his olditude. Like I said, the version of the story we've found, which is still occasionally fragmentary and got some stuff going on, it was probably being told for a little bit before somebody decided to write it down, but that is from about 4,000 years ago. So, I've done this and other things. Be sure to check out our playlist, Teach My Mega Sensei, that collects all our podcast episodes where we do lore topics, and by we, I mean me. But the short version is because Gil is from an ancient antique time where history was kind of fluid and possibility exists. He has a lot of mystery built up. There's a lot of possibility open to him because history, folklore, and everything is kind of nebulous in that period, so there's a lot of possibilities he has access to, which means he tends to be super high quality. He was also actually a really cool guy. He was totally the great super king, super god king, super king of Uruk. You know, he was 2/3 god and all kinds of other claims and strengths which seem absolutely, ludicrous now. A real classic adventurer type king. But because he's so ancient, he has access to a lot of mystical things and bits and bobs, which makes him very impressive. Now, we've got all that out of the way. Why don't we ask that question of his impressiveness to mechanics? So, let's pull him up. All right, so, stat-wise, Gilgamesh, pretty high up in archers, which is a class loaded with lots of big beat sticky characters. But he ranks number 3rd currently, overall in JP. He'll be number 2, though, right now for a while. But he's just a tiny smidge less than Arjuna and just a tiny smidge more than Ishtar. All right? Smidges. Very close. Very packed field. So obviously, that's got some staying power if he's still only number 3 after 5 years of FGO, with the number 1 slot only bumping him down to 3 within the past year or so. So, pretty solid stats. HP-wise, obviously not the worst, but it is fairly low. He's only also not the worst because there's a tie, and Seishonagon exists. So, he's pretty low on that scale. And you do notice he doesn't really have any hard survivals. That's not really Gil's thing. But interestingly, for a pretty early character, he's got a saber-style deck as an archer. So he's got 2 arts cards, 2 buster cards, 1 quick card. His hit counts are ludicrous. Even today, these are super high. 5, 5, 5, and an 8 extra. So obviously, his NP charge is quite low, but with 2 5-hit arts cards, that's still pretty decent. And then they massage it even further with some of his skills. So Gil does not necessarily have a problem generating NP. It just depends on what cards you're pulling. But with that hit count, he will make up for some of those low numbers overall. Obviously, he's an archer, so pretty decent star absorption, middling star generation. Though, again, with 5-hit buster and quick cards, that'll be fairly decently applied. His NP, I'm just, for the sake of saving space, I'm only showing you the powered-up version. So, the first version was just do damage, do bonus damage. The second version, the upgraded version, which I'm showing you here, gives him a flat 30% increase to NP strength before he does that, which is pretty bonkers. As I've just said, his attack is already quite high. It deals AoE buster damage, so relatively low modifiers, but it does bonus trait damage based on overcharge. Adds an additional 150% damage to servants, mostly not of Star. So it's a little weird. It's mostly not Star servants, but there are a couple who do still get it. Bedivere, Skahak, Jean, and Da Vinci do not have the protection from bonus damage. I'm not entirely sure why, but most servants who have the Star attribute are not to it. In fact, I can list you the entire group of servants who aren't weak to Enema Elish because it's literally all of the others who are. So that's Abigail, Altera Santa, Fujino, Drake, Gatia, MHX, MHXA, MHXX, Napoleon, Tesla, Romulus, both Shikis, Kiara, Holmes, Mozart. So that's, let me see, it's what, like 4, 8, 12, exactly 16? Yeah, it's like 16, literally 16 servants in the game he doesn't get this bonus to. So obviously, even though he is an archer, with his NP, and with some other stuff we'll talk about in a second, but with the NP especially upgraded, He does pretty decent damage to basically all servants. He makes a great generic, oh, I'm facing a servant, I'll hit him pretty hard. If you can get a saber, or you can get a berserker or something, somebody with, flat damage, class advantage up on, you can make that work even more. But he's got a pretty good level. Obviously, I think that's a good choice, though, for AoE busters. You want a little bit of that enhancement. It is also only one hit, so, worry about that. But in general, it's a pretty decent NP for an AoE sweeper, with, again, that favoritism towards servants. Can be very handy. So let's talk about skills, because this is actually quite interesting. Gil has a very lore-compliant, almost very basic skill set, but because we talked about his aforementioned oldness and coolness, his ratings are all really, really high in them, so it's generally worked out so far. He's only needed one skill upgrade, and even then, that's probably just because the nature of the game has changed. So, first skill, Charisma A+, that's right, he goes all the way to A+. That means he does 10 and a bit to 21% attack up for 3 turns. Again, talking about how his NP already slaps pretty hard. He can throw this on himself and all the squad. You get even more slaps. Again, very high damage output. Just raw damage. Attack up is arguably the best one, because it's just pure damage for everything. He has Golden Rule A, that increases his NP gain for 3 turns, from 20% to 50%. So, yeah, know how I said his NP is a little low? You will still get some decent, but you can make it much better with that 50% increase on Golden Rule for 3 turns. So, when you see AAQ in there, or you see an Arts Chain you can do that just involves a Gil card, though again, with that 8-hit, I would recommend doing the Brave Chain if you can. He can just make that go up for 3 turns, and he will get a decent amount of NP gain out of it. But that's a little slow. So originally, he just had Collector EX as his third skill, which would just give him increase his Star Gather, which is pretty decent for an Archer. Archers have high, but not the highest Star Absorption, and much like people have a problem when using Riders for this, because Riders are good at Star Generation, but they have a really high weight, so they tend to suck them all up. Archers are also pretty high up, so you have to compete with yourself. Collector EX, no, he doesn't. He just gets all the stars. And it's for 3 turns, so it sticks around for a while. However, that wasn't fast enough, so they've upgraded it to, after his Interlude, he will get a different version, which is... Sorry, I'm in traits. Hold on, let me just go back over. The upgraded version is Treasury of Babylon, which keeps the same star rate, and keeps the same all that stuff, but it also gives him a 20-30% battery on top. That means you can K-scope with Gilgamesh, or Imaginary Element, all that stuff when we talk about CEs later. But it also means that, if you need to top him off, you can top off his battery, and you get stars absorption, which if you generated stars through another means, which I will say that is something that Gil's not necessarily great at on his own. I mean, he does have great hit counts, but he doesn't necessarily have any buffs for it. But, spoilers about passives, he does have a very high crit damage modifier, so he really wants those stars. You can easily turn this into a NPBB chain, do a lot of big damage on a target, which he works great at, because that AoE sweeper will clear away units, clear away adds, do extra damage to a servant, follow up with some crits. Does pretty goo. So we were already talking about his passives a little bit, because honestly, like I said, Gil's skill set's really not that complex, very lore compliant, a little vanilla, but that works for him. So, we can just move on to passives. So we already mentioned he has Independent Action A+, so he gets big crit damage. He is a Knight's class, so he does get magic resistance. It's pretty low, though. It's only magic resistance E. Fucking fight me. Sorry, that's a long-standing joke. But E is still 10% debuff resistance, not the worst. He also has Divinity B, so he gets a slight damage cap increase on top of the fact that he has really good damage. Overall, hey, guess what? Gilgamesh does damage. He's a little vanilla, right? He doesn't necessarily have a lot of crazy flexibilities that go out right compared to all the stuff you're doing. You compare him to other high-level archers, he's not necessarily as flashy. For instance, I talked about how Napoleon's up in there. Napoleon is, number 5 in attack, number 6, something like that. Napoleon had vanilla skills that they all buffed to do extra stuff. Ishtar has some very impressive skills, which can make up for the fact that she has slightly less damage. She's got, her own self-crit buff, and then Mana Burst Gem, if you can get it to proc correctly, is crazy good. But Gil has a very flattened basic effect, which is he does damage. He does bonus damage to, like, I'm going to say 90 to 95% of servants. I could actually do that math, but I won't because I hate it. And he has, very generic modifiers to just, I just do 21% attack up for me and everybody. I'm going to do flat damage up. I get flat 11% on crits. I can give myself the stars so I will crit. I can battery. I can increase my NP gain. And then he, like I said, NPBB chain. He's still a very excellent choice of AoE archer in a field that is quite saturated with them. As the first, with minimal tuning, he has developed quite a decent skill set that will make him very useful for farming and even for bosses. Like I said, that extra damage tune-up, really great. So, if you don't have a Gil and you don't know what you're rolling for the rest of the year, consider rolling. It's a thing to think about. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about that stuff we do with supports. So, and CEs. So obviously, his third skill, when upgraded past his interlude, has a minimum 20% battery. That means you can K-scope, or you can go ahead and... Oh, sorry. It's spicy chicken for this. I'm a little... Don't be afraid if I make weird sounds, or have to pause suddenly. But you could go with Imaginary Element, if you've got the full version with a 30% battery. I don't think there's a lot of 70% NP ups. That seems like that would be a good number. 70 to 75 game? Anyway, with his Buster and NP focus, you could also consider, slapping on any number of CEs which just increase his Buster potential, increase his NP damage, increase his criticals is also a good one, or increases his star generation rate. Just a decent check out there. And obviously, with the fact that he does 30% himself, you could stick him with any of those 50% batteries and combo him with Merlin, who is, of course, a pretty good combo for him, because, hey, Gil does Buster crits. What does Merlin support? So, with Merlin, you have all the hard defenses you need that Gil doesn't have. As I mentioned earlier, Gil doesn't really do defense. It's not even a thing. Even his passive defensive ability is real low. And his HP is a little slim, so he can be a little squishy. Merlin will take care of that for you with hard defenses and ability to regen. That will help Gil polish off any slowness to his NP gain, or at the very least means you can, like I say, do a 50% CE. And, of course, we'll give him Buster Strength and Crit up, and even more attack up for even more basic bitch damage. So you can really wreck shop. And with his NP, Merlin will also give you stars per turn. Another decent supporter is Waver, as the generic support. Waver gives damage cut and defense up, which is helpful, in addition to giving the battery on that. More attack and more attack plus. And that 30% targetable will give Gil more critical damage, which Gil wants. So those two are really the mainliners there. Works out really well. You can also use Gil himself as a arguably semi-support role. You can pair him with any single target of your choice for NP damage, because Gil can do spread out his charisma buff and work as a great wave clearer and starter damager up to somebody with a single target. Or you can go in waves. Ishtar also has a charisma-like effect that's, AoE, so you could easily kind of wombo combo them together. Have them, give each other buffs so they can hit pretty hard. Stuff like that. It's a very interesting proposition. Sorry, I paused for a second there, which you probably won't hear, but I paused because I was trying to sort archers to look through them to see if anybody else wombos well with Gil, and I was like, what's Nobu doing? I was accidentally sorting my min attack, not max attack. But yeah, I'm not seeing anybody else who springs out. I mean, I guess Napoleon's also got all AoE. That's a trick you can do, right? If you're trying to do, like, cool 3-turn setups, you can daisy chain some of your AoE archers together, and because they have AoE support skills, they can kind of play off each other. It's totally a thing. For just generic support casters, I would recommend Waver or Merlin. In general, while Gil does have 2 arts cards with good hit counts, with his Buster NP and 2 Buster cards, and kind of his desire to crit up and stuff like that, you probably want to stick to Buster supports. You can work out a lot of stuff in there. And there are some budget options, too, if you want to go that route. So, let's go ahead and talk about Rarity. So, obviously, as I said, Gil was a super popular raid up. You've missed quite a few already, kids. I'm sorry. But he has a tendency to come back basically every New Year's. And in EN, by New Year's, I mean Thanksgiving. So, yeah, he will probably come back this Thanksgiving, unless he doesn't because he had Gilfest. But also, he was still in Happy New Year for 2020. So he's still got another raid up planned, at least. So he probably will have one more raid up this year. Can't say for sure, but probably. And after the upcoming Gilfest and that New Year's Thanksgiving, whatever banner they decide to make it in North America, he will be on the 20 million downloads campaign. Again, whatever number that ends up being for us. Because those usually involve big rotations of peoples. Now, after that, he hasn't showed up a lot, but like I said, he tends to come up very frequently. I'm not going to be shocked if, New Year 2021 in JP, which, come to think of it, isn't that far away. That's like 3 months, guys. Holy shit. Where did 2020 go? But yeah, he's frequently on raid-ups with lots of limited units. He will probably assuredly be coming back later for stuff. Plus, we don't know what kind of Fez we're going to get this year either. There could be other opportunities. So, Gil is a fairly popular, regular raid-up. He usually gets one at least once a year, if not multiple times. Like he was on the advance for Fate XL0 and the pre-event for CCC. It's because he's so popular. Every time they do something, he shows up. But yeah, I think that's all there is to say about the Gilster. Yeah, I will just mention, I won't go through them, but you can see his ascension and skill reinforcements on the side. Being an early unit, they're pretty tame. Back in the day, those hearts would have been a little hard to come by, but hopefully you've built up a decent stock. He does need a lot of Void Dust for his skills, but again, hopefully you've been getting a decent amount. I know that I got oodles of Void Dust because when you did daily mats farms, you would fight Shadow Servants, so you would get a decent amount of Void Dust whether you wanted it or not. But otherwise, they're older mats, so they're pretty reliable. If you're brand new, like if you haven't rolled Gil yet, you might want to watch out for those hero proofs, but it shouldn't be too bad. I like how I said I wasn't going to talk about them, and then I did actually talk about a few of them. Well, I had some thoughts. I have to think about the breadth of my user base. Not everyone's a day one player. Who, if you've been playing since day one, you probably still have a decent amount of hero proofs, because man, they just handed those out like candy for like a solid year. Anyway, yep, that's him. He's that guy. All right, let's wrap up the video. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Okay, so if you're interested in Gilfest, which obviously, in case that wasn't clear from when I was talking about his raid-ups and Rarity, that's what this is in celebration of, the fact that Gilfest Battle for New York is coming out, and, we're working on that one. They've announced he will be springing forth. Oh, and actually, I should say, it's, I forgot that, because it's goofy in the thing. Gil will have 2 years running of that, that's right. Sorry, I forgot that they're the same. I was looking at his Rarity ban-ups, and they're like, New Year's, Gilfest, New Year's, Gilfest, huh? That's how frequently he gets raid-ups. They look so similar, you're like, is he coming back? Yeah, so like I said, you'll get like a couple a year for the next couple of years on him. Anyway, we are doing that to celebrate Gilfest. Be sure to tune into this week's Let's Talk FGO. Sometimes I have to stop and enunciate. This week's Let's Talk FGO to get the pregame on that, so all you need to know about that event. That sweet, sweet lotto you're craving, I know. And, of course, you can learn about other stuff. Alrighty, I think that's all we got going on. So, I'll go ahead and wind out of here, get out of your hair, and remind everybody to give this video a like if you liked it. And you can leave any comments you have in the comment section down below, or hit us up on our Discord. That link is, as always, in the video description and on our channel page. You should subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hit that subscribe button. So you can get all the latest FGO Wanteds and all our other stuff like our podcast, Let's Talk FGO. Also consider hitting that bell for notifications so you always know when we post a new video or when we stream. Sometimes videos get posted at weird times. Who knew? And of course, like it's at the front of the show, consider supporting us on Patreon. You could have gotten access to this episode early and lots of other goodies, like at our higher levels, listening to the show live and other stuff. And it really helps us out and supports us. You can also join our channel with a little join button down there. Become access to our memberships, get emotes and fun stuff. Also supports us. Yeah, alright, that's everything. I'm gonna get out of here. So I hope y'all had fun. Hope you mongrels had fun. And we'll be back with Wanted sometime? Probably Halloween. Probably gonna be Halloween. Alright, I'm outie. I had to go find where I left my keys to my golden apple treasury.